It's the All Things Strange podcast. I am your host, Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can find all of our wonderful links in the description on the Linktree, where you can find our Patreon, our Discord, our merchandise, and more. This week's episode, the Petrozavodsk Phenomenon, Part 2. All right, here we go. Before we get into it, just gotta mention, we do have a Patreon with 2 tiers of patronage. The first tier will get you bonus episodes, early access, and after hours when available. And the second tier will get you the ability to vote on upcoming topics such as this one. All right, well, without any further ado, let's get into it. Where we left off last time, we were headed towards a sighting in Lekhta, Lekhta. I don't know how you pronounce that. This is in the Leningrad area, as far as I can tell. Witnesses saw 3 luminous objects to the north. The first object grew into a ball and then dissipated without a trace. 15 seconds later, they saw a second object appear, moving slowly towards the north-northwest direction. This object grew into a ball and then transformed into a dome. After that, it divided into 3 thin white stripes. Up to now, this whole part took about 2 to 3 minutes. But after that, a third object appeared to the north-northwest. It was unlike the first 2 objects and remained motionless for some time. Then it spread into a luminous ball, dissipated, and sprouted stripes, just like some of the other sightings. This one is notable because of the multiple objects. Also, it was reported in this area that VLF radio signals, which is 3 to 30 kilohertz, were detected and recorded, but those recordings have never been released. What were the signals? Did they carry some kind of strange encoded message? Are they communicating with us? They could be anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be any particular entity. Who knows? We don't know. Just like so many of these cases, there are very frustrating details like that. I would love to be able to hear that radio signal, but unfortunately we can't. All right, Chem, which is 200 miles north of Petrozavodsk. Witnesses on this one saw a large diameter sphere moving south to north at a high rate of speed. They witnessed high-speed right-angle turns, and also they witnessed the object change shape. It turned into a rectangular object with a lattice structure, and it emitted bright rays. That one's interesting because it took place around the same time as the other ones, but it doesn't sound anything like the main sighting seen over Petrozavodsk. So, who knows? Let's see, Louis, L-O-U-H-I. I feel like I talked about this one last time. All right, but whatever. 300 miles north of Petrozavodsk, several objects were seen in this sighting. The first was seen around 2:30 or 1.5 hours before the main sighting. And after the main sighting, a glow in the form of an oval with a bright stripe in the middle was seen to the northeast. And similar things were seen in different places. The glowing lasted until dawn. So I guess it left some kind of glow behind it as it passed through. I don't know. That's a weird one. What the heck? I don't know. All right, there were some sightings from airplanes. For instance, a plane at about 10,000 meters or approximately 30,000 feet altitude I think that's 30,000, really roughly. I think it's 1 to 3 there. Let me see. 10,000 meters to feet. I guess with the internet in front of me, I have no excuses. Yeah, 32,808 feet. So that is, roughly speaking, what you would expect to see for a cruising altitude for a passenger jet. So at about 10,000 meters or 32,000 feet over Riga, which is 500 miles southwest of Petrozavodsk in Latvia, so completely different country here. They reported seeing from the plane a bright cloud in the air, and they had to change course to go around it. Now, if this is true, we have an approximate altitude and a location for an object. The distance, remember, to the horizon is from about 10,000 meters, about 220 miles, and that would prove that multiple objects were seen, all performing the same jellyfish maneuver at the same time. It doesn't really make any sense to me. I can't explain it, but there it is. It's really weird. If they were seeing something very, very far away in Petrozavodsk, which again is about 500 miles away from Riga, then there's no way they would have to go around the object because it's so far away. So we have an object placed 10,000 meters over Riga in Latvia. It gets weirder and weirder, guys, right? I don't know. I can't make any sense of this myself. It makes zero sense unless we have multiple objects. Who knows, man? This is weird. But like I said in the last one, it doesn't really make I don't know. I guess it's possible, but it seems strange to me that you'd have so many different objects making this jellyfish formation. It's weird, man. It's really weird. I don't know. Very strange. All right, another airplane sighting that lasted about 30 minutes. And a passenger jet was approaching Moscow. Well, I'm assuming it was a passenger jet. What I saw, it didn't really say. Anyways, we have an airplane approaching Moscow between 4 and 5 a.m., flying at about 11,000 meters, so roughly 35,000 feet. And there was a solid cloud cover. They saw a bright object under the clouds. So once again, we have confirmation of an object under the clouds, and it doesn't say what the cloud cover is or what the altitude of the cloud cover is, but it does say that it was seen under the cloud cover, which I guess could be, a cloud cover could be many different types of altitudes, just depending on conditions. All right. The object was also seen, or objects or something was seen on radar over Helsinki by people at the airport. The radar showed that it was moving to the east, which would be consistent with the rocket launch. But again, Helsinki is really far away from where the rocket was launched, so it would have to be a completely different rocket launch, which I guess is possible. It's theoretically possible that the Soviet Union could have done a simultaneous rocket launch. But anyways, something was captured over Helsinki, and it was seen moving to the east. However, one witness from the Helsinki airport later came out and said that it was not detected on radar. So we have conflicting reports there. One person says yes, one person says no. Who the heck knows? Now that I think about it, I didn't put this one in the theories section that we'll go over in a little bit here. But what if they were testing multiple launches of ICBMs to see if they could coordinate that? Because let's just do a thought experiment here. All right, let's do a little thought experiment here. Now, remember, this happened in 1977, which, as it always is, was the height of the Cold War. And I'm guessing, I'm not going to look it up because we have enough to talk about as it is, but I'm guessing by this time they were well into the ICBM phase of nuclear relations. So what if they were testing a system to simultaneously launch ICBMs from all over the Soviet Union? Because if there was a nuclear war, they would need to launch multiple missiles from multiple sites as quickly as possible, because chances are you would only have a certain amount of time. Who knows? An hour, 30 minutes, maybe less, who knows? Before your country started getting destroyed by nuclear missiles. So you would want to retaliate before that happened. You'd want to launch everything at once. So maybe they were doing a multiple launch test just to test their nuclear capability. Now, this is a really interesting possibility because if that's the case, and it came out as a UFO sighting, then the Soviet government or the military would probably gladly accept the UFO explanation as a cover for their test, as a misdirection. Why not? That's a really interesting idea. I haven't seen that anywhere. I just thought of it myself. Well, isn't that nice? No, but really, that could be one possibility. It seems extremely improbable, but I mean, the whole thing seems completely improbable, so why not entertain ideas that are possible? Last time we did go over why it's almost certainly not multiple objects, or a single object, right? But remember last time I was saying, okay, if it was a single object, how could it be seen over so many different areas? And if it was multiple objects, why would they all synchronize this bizarre jellyfish formation? But if it was some sort of simultaneous test and they were doing it on purpose, that could explain why everything was synced up. Interesting idea. Does it hold water? I don't know. You guys tell me. Who knows? All right, Leningrad Airport. People did see it at the Leningrad Airport, but as far as I could find, it was not captured on radar. One interesting detail I found about the sighting at Petrozavodsk is that there was damage around the city. There were, for instance, 5 houses were found with holes in them. There were holes melted straight through the glass at the houses, and these holes seemed to point the direction of where the object was. And there were also depressions in brick walls. So it looks like some of these light beams that were raining down on the city, it didn't mean that it was figuratively raining. Something was actually raining down on the city. Really kind of weird. Of course, it could just be a coincidence. These strange holes burned through houses and walls and whatnot. They could be related to something completely different, something completely unrelated to the phenomenon. But people did notice it after the sighting. The following day, people found these holes. So who knows? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We don't know. But the fact that the holes pointed in the direction of the phenomenon, it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting little detail that I kind of don't know what to think about. Now, if they are, somebody went to the holes and calculated the trajectory. Okay, if these holes came from the object, they all point in the same direction, suggesting a single point source rather than a moving source or something like that. And they point towards a source 14 kilometers above the Earth's surface. That would be 8.6 miles or 46,000 feet. This is well within the capability of mankind or man-made technology at the time. So this doesn't necessarily rule out a man-made object, but it does give us an altitude or a theoretical altitude for the sighting over Petrozavodsk. That's 46,000 feet. Hell, some airplanes can go that high, although from what I understand, it would be unusual. Still, it's not that much higher than you would expect to fly if you were in a passenger jet. All right, some elements of this sighting may rule out a rocket launch. For instance, objects seen hovering for long periods of time. You might not expect that from a rocket launch. I would expect a rocket launch to continuously move. However, depending on the rocket's direction of motion, it could appear to hover momentarily. Could it appear to hover for 5 or 10 minutes? I don't know. I find that that's doubtful, but I'm not a rocket scientist, so who the heck knows? Movement with a change of course might seem unlikely for a rocket launching a satellite straight up, but again, different stages of the rocket could detach. They could still have fuel, and they could zigzag all over tarnation, so who knows? Multiple objects certainly seem to point against a rocket being the cause of all of the sightings. Objects flying under the clouds certainly would rule out a rocket launch because the rocket would very quickly go over the clouds. Objects seen moving to the west, not to the east, would rule out the Cosmos 955 rocket, which was launched to the east. And also the object moving to the north would rule out the Cosmos rocket launch because that was launched to the east and witnesses saw something moving towards the north. Okay, so those are a lot of the witness statements or what people saw in different areas. There was some variation, but there were a lot of similarities to a lot of those. Not all of them, some of them were unique, but people saw this thing all over the place. When I was looking at these sightings, I had the map open where you can check distances, and I checked distances from Petrozavodsk to all these different places, in Europe and the Soviet Union. They're everywhere, man. People were seeing this thing everywhere. It's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting to look at that on a map. The Academy of Sciences in the USSR issued a report that concluded, quote, based on the available data, it is unfeasible to satisfactorily understand the observed phenomenon. In other words, the rocket cannot account for all of the sightings, and there's nothing that they're aware of that can account for all of the sightings. It's a weird one. There was actually a full investigation by the Soviet government, and they couldn't figure out what this was. Generally, it was considered unknown because of the things that rule out the Cosmos launch. And if it was just some secret Soviet test, then they would have known what it was and wouldn't have wasted resources investigating it. And the reason I say that is I didn't really take notes on it for this episode, but there was a document leak at some point. I forget what year, but many years after the fact, one of the documents from this incident. Oh, wait, no, I think I did take notes on that later on. So maybe I'll wait on that. But yeah, there was a document leak. So they actually wasted, or I shouldn't say waste, but they actually committed resources to investigating this. And they wouldn't have done that if they already knew what it was. It just doesn't make any sense. Here's another quote. Despite the available facts, we cannot explain the essence of the miraculous phenomenon that was observed in the autumn of 1977 near Petrozavodsk. Vladimir Migulin, head of ISMIREN, or the Pushkov Institute of Terrestrial Magnetism, Ionosphere and Radio Wave Propagation of the Russian Academy of Sciences. So that's who said that quote. That's a science dude quote there, so he knows what he's talking about. So he said that we can't explain it. Later on, he changed his mind. Vladimir Migulin changed his mind that it couldn't be explained and said that it was due to a solar flare. So out of nowhere in 1985, in the magazine Smena, 1985, number 4, he says that it has now been explained. We know what happened. He says that reports that on September 20th, 1977, a powerful solar flare occurred, as a result of which a complex geophysical situation was created. At that time, ISMIREN was conducting an experiment south of Arkhangelsk with a new device for studying the magnetosphere. In addition, a device for studying outer space was launched right there, individual elements of which, burning up in the atmosphere, were clearly visible in the sky. And so, the complex geophysical situation was superimposed on the consequences of human technical activity, And all this taken together gave rise to the phenomena observed over Petrozavodsk. So in other words, he's saying that it was a solar flare and human activity doing weird stuff in the sky. We were testing stuff, magnet stuff and whatever, and it was just that. So here's another quote I have. The wording, of course, is very vague and fuzzy, from which one can conclude that the causes of the phenomenon were a combination of a solar flare, an experiment with a new device, and the launch of a device for studying outer space. Yeah, because he doesn't really say, the wording is kind of vague there, and he doesn't really say exactly what it is. He just kind of throws out a couple of different things and hopes that something sticks, I guess. So in 1989, a couple of years later, Migulin changes his mind again and said that it was a failed rocket launch that explained the event. But that's kind of weird because the only rocket launch at the time that we know of was the Cosmos 955. We know the trajectory of that rocket, and it doesn't match the pattern of the sightings. Also, as far as I could tell, that rocket launch was successful. It was not a failed rocket launch. So that's kind of a strange explanation. Perhaps there was a second rocket launch that night that we don't really know of what it was. That is a possibility. And like I said earlier, maybe many, many rocket launches. And maybe they all failed simultaneously. Who knows? There was a lot of solar flare activity on the 20th, so it's conceivable that this was some sort of related natural phenomenon. So that is a possibility, I suppose. I don't know what that could be, but it could be some really super rare type thing. There were also northern lights witnessed the night of the sighting, so maybe that has something to do with it, but northern lights don't really look like what the witnesses saw. They don't tend to be so bright that you can't look at it. I think I said last episode, but some witnesses described the light getting so bright that they couldn't look directly at it. They kind of had to shield their eyes. That doesn't sound like the Northern Lights to me, but who knows? All right, another explanation. It's a modern myth and also stupidity. That's a real explanation I found out there on the interwebs. Somebody just said, basically all y'all's stupid and you're believing something that didn't actually happen. It's kind of weird. We got a picture of it, guys. We know that it happened. There's a friggin' picture. So, how much of a myth could it be? Who knows? Was some of it blown out of proportion? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Anything's possible, I suppose. All right. Another explanation. Some kind of natural phenomenon. I guess I already sort of went over that. Another one, man-made stuff like rockets and balloons, I guess. Again, it's sort of like what Migulin was saying, just a combination of different things. Another explanation, fireballs and meteors. I've never seen a jellyfish-shaped meteor or fireball. I've seen meteors. I've even seen, one time in my life, I saw an absolutely spectacular fireball. It was so spectacular that it was during the day. I believe I've talked about this before on the show. I was with Agent Ether. It was really wild looking, like pretty neat. But I can't imagine them making a jellyfish in the sky. I can't imagine it, meteors and things. I can't imagine those being able to account for the witness sightings. They don't make 90-degree turns and they don't, I don't know, whatever. So who knows? Anything's possible. Let's see. Here's a good one. So pockets of ionized ozone form in the air and they can appear to be the shape of like a flying saucer and they can be luminescent. This is a really cool one because I never heard of this before and it appears to be a real thing. Again, I didn't have time to go down this particular rabbit hole, but that's a pretty neat phenomenon right there. And I wonder if that phenomenon might be responsible for some UFO sightings, if this is indeed a real thing, which who knows? I didn't have time to look into it, so it might not be. But the problem with this one is just like the Northern Lights, supposedly they're not very bright. so they can't become so bright that you have to shield your eyes, and they're not going to move against the wind, which the Petrozavodsk object did move against the wind, and many of the other UFOs seen did move against the wind. So it's a really interesting idea, fascinating idea, and I'm going to keep it in mind for future UFO sightings because you never know. I want to look into this one more when I have a chance. It's really, really fascinating. I mean, you never know what nature's going to do. Nature can do some really weird stuff. So you never rule it out, I guess. But for this particular case, I don't think this is a good explanation. All right, let's talk again about the failed rocket launch idea. When a rocket blows up or you have a failed rocket launch, it can actually, believe it or not, look a lot like what the witnesses describe. I implore you to search for some images. They look really weird, like really weird. But it doesn't explain certain aspects of the sighting. If we make some assumptions, for example, that some of the details of the sighting are somehow misreported, then maybe it's a possibility. If we assume that there were many 10, 15 different rocket launches that all failed in the exact same way at the exact same time, then it's a real possibility. It seems like it's a little far-fetched, but hey, what does Sherlock Holmes say? If you've ruled out everything else, then the impossible must be true, or I messed that up. You know what I'm talking about, right? That Sherlock Holmes thing. You know what I'm talking. If Agent Ether was here, then she would know. She's a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. But it's possible, I guess, but it's not a really good fit for what witnesses saw. And again, the Cosmos 955 launch was successful, so it would need to be a launch other than that. All right, another idea is some kind of energy field from a UFO, and people have discussed ideas like when it's powered up, or maybe there was some kind of malfunction and you saw this spectacular failure in the sky. Perhaps what people saw was some kind of failure where the object blew up, and that's why you see these, this jellyfish thing. That's maybe perhaps shrapnel or parts of the ship, and that might explain the holes in the wall at Petrozavodsk, but it doesn't explain seeing these things over such a wide area. It's really weird, but it's still a fun idea. It's an interesting idea. So this event was a big reason why the Setka AN was formed, which is a Soviet research group for investigating strange things like UFOs. Again, if it was merely a rocket test or a failed rocket, the Soviet Union would have known about this. I mean, they're not dummies over there. They have scientists too. They have physics and they have radar and they have all the stuff that we have. So if it was just a rocket, they would have definitely known about that. And it would not have led them to form an investigation group to look at UFOs. And they wouldn't have wasted any money on it at all. A copy of the Soviet investigation on the Petrozavodsk incident was leaked to Geipan, GEIPAN, which is a French UFO group. I believe it's a government group. They investigate UFOs, and they got a copy of this report. That report was then forwarded to CUFOS, CUFOS, and eventually given to NASA by J. Allen Hynek. It was translated to English, and it made the rounds. Proponents offered it as really good evidence of UFOs, while detractors said that it was just a disinformation campaign. I mean, who knows, but it would have to be a pretty sophisticated disinformation campaign for them to fake a UFO sighting and then publish that fake account in many, many newspapers and magazines all over Russia way back in 1977 when it happened. And then years and years later, release the document to Gaipan. I mean, you're playing the long game there. Is it possible? Yeah, absolutely, that's possible. But I don't know. It seems a little unlikely to me, but I suppose never underestimate the KGB or whoever the heck would have been in charge of an operation like that. And it's fun to think, what if it could have all been just a cloak and dagger kind of a thing? And if they did that, it would make their adversaries waste resources investigating it. So who knows? Anything's possible. All right, let's look at a similar case that happened on June 14th, 1980. This happened during the launch of the Cosmos 1188 satellite. People saw sightings of strange things that coincided with the launch, and this time the sightings lined up with the rocket once again. But UFOs were seen, not just the rocket launch. The launch was at 2351, but previously in that day, earlier in the day, a witness observed a cigar-shaped craft through binoculars over Sheremetyevo Airport. Sheremetyevo? Sheremetyevo. Say that 3 times fast in a row. It hovered for about 15 minutes and then flew vertically up at a high speed and disappeared. There was another sighting in Balashikha from 23 to 2330. Somebody saw a motionless object emitting 2 straight beams. And that's all it says. I'm assuming that's beams of light, not like, 2 sticks coming out of it. 2315 to 2340, witnesses in Moscow and surrounding area saw, quote, flights of unknown round objects with red trails in various directions with azimuths of 90 to 240 degrees. And in a number of places, some other small objects were observed flying out of these main objects and performing various maneuvers at low altitude. And that's not entirely unlike some other sightings I've seen. It's not super rare for witnesses to see a UFO spit out some other object and then that other object go do stuff, almost like it's a probe or a scout or something, right? That's not unheard of. It's pretty similar to that. All right, near Chkalovsky, witnesses reported a motionless spindle-shaped object. Remember, there was a witness during the Petrozavodsk incident, one of the witnesses saw what they described as a spindle-shaped object. So here we have again, during this rocket launch, we have another spindle-shaped object seen over Chkalovsky. It had 2 beams of light, it had 2 beams hanging off, and a small object was attached to the beams. That's really weird. What to make of that one, I don't know. That's really bizarre. An egg-shaped object was seen in the Moscow area, moving in a spiral trajectory. Now that sounds a lot like a rocket launch. Egg-shaped, maybe not, but a spiral trajectory, possibly, yeah. If you look up rockets, some of them launch and you end up with this pinwheel looking spiral in the sky. Really weird looking, but it's just a rocket. Another object was seen moving in a zigzag pattern simultaneously with the egg-shaped object. Lieutenant Colonel V.G. Karyakin saw I'm so sorry for these apologies. Apologies for these pronunciation, guys. Lieutenant Colonel V.G. Karyakin, Karyakin, saw an elliptical object hovering at 2.5 meters above the ground. It had a protective field that prevented him from getting close. That's all I saw on that one, man. That is a pretty wild sighting. That's Lieutenant Colonel V.G. Karyakin, in case you guys want to try to find more information about that one. I didn't see anything else about it. I just saw a little blurb on it, and it is weird. All right, 2350 to 2 in the morning on June 14th to 15th, in the city of Volsk, witnesses saw a spherical object flying at a low altitude, about 100 to 200 meters, emitting 5 rays of light towards the ground. The rays then merged into one ray. There were electrical effects reported in the area, such as cars and other electronics shutting down. On June 15th at 1800, the day after the launch, witnesses in Zagoryanka saw a small black cylinder hanging in the sky. There were also sightings over Buenos Aires, Cordoba, and Ariana in Argentina 1 hour after the launch, which is definitely way too far to be caused by the launch. That's like on the other side of the planet practically, right? There's another case that happened. Yeah, so that previous case, it's pretty similar to the Petrozavodsk. You have a rocket launch, and seen around the same time of the rocket launch, you have many different UFOs seen by many people in many different places. Pretty similar in a lot of ways, although I didn't see any jellyfish reported specifically, but still, it's kind of weird. There's another similar case that happened May 14th to 15th in 1981. This was also a satellite launch, and there were many reports describing the launch, but other reports describing UFOs. Before the launch, witnesses described a flattened ball with a beam shining down. And when this object was seen, wire communication failed in the area. A group of servicemen at Viborg saw a hovering object that shined a beam of light below, and it slowly moved towards the airfield. Near Leningrad on May 15th, so remember, we're talking about a rocket launch here on the 5th, I believe on the 15th. Actually, I don't have that notated yet, so I don't know. This case happened May 14th to 15th. So anyways, Leningrad, May 15th, at 2 in the morning, a luminous flying ball was seen moving east to west. It made 3 circles over Lodinoy Pole and then flew to the northeast. There were over 100 witnesses in Leningrad, and some of them reported multiple objects. This suggests that there was more than one event or sighting, and it wasn't just the rocket launch. And once again, for this event, there were widespread sightings all over the place, all over Russia and Lithuania, just like in the Petrozavodsk incident. You have a rocket launch, you have mass sightings all over the place with multiple independent witnesses. So just like the Petrozavodsk incident, there were widespread sightings all over the place, all over Russia and Lithuania, that happened simultaneously with a rocket launch. Did these things have anything to do with the rocket launches, or was it just a coincidence? Who knows, but it's still pretty interesting. I didn't have a chance to look up too much details on this particular sighting or the previous one because, we're at, already out of, for this case, I did somewhere on the order of 40 pages of notes. And at that point, it's getting pretty long in the tooth there. So I didn't really have time to look into more stuff. I was running late with the episode. As much as I wanted to, I figured I have to get the episode out. It's been too long. I need to record this damn thing. So I didn't look into those ones too much deeper. But if you want to, I'm sure you can find more information about those events. Or maybe not. Who knows? All right. I found another event on September 7th, 1984. Quote, "The story of the observation," and again, this is a Russian translation, so the wording is going to be a little weird probably. "The story of the observation of an anomalous phenomenon described in the newspaper Trud, Trud, 1985, January 20th, in the article by V.V. Vostrukin, exactly at 4:10, deserves separate consideration. This article described how the crew of a Tu-134A passenger plane flying along the Tbilisi-Tallinn route saw on the section south of Minsk how a thin beam of light was directed toward the ground from some unknown object located at approximately the same altitude as the plane, which then turned into a cone. In the area illuminated by this beam, houses and roads became clearly visible. Then this beam was directed at the plane. Now the crew members saw a blinding white dot surrounded by concentric colored circles. According to their testimony, this point then flared up, and in its place a luminous ball with a diameter of half the lunar disk was formed, which suddenly fell down, then rose vertically upward, darted to the right and left, and was fixed in its original position. The pilots perceived this as a signal and responded by periodically turning on and off the headlights and navigation lights of the aircraft. After this, a green tail appeared from the ball, which was initially directed toward the ground and then took on a horizontal position. After 10 minutes, a thin beam of light appeared from the ball, directed left and upward, and after 25 minutes, another beam directed downward and illuminating the clouds above Lake Pskov. At the same time, another passenger plane, a Tu-134, was flying along the same corridor from Leningrad to Tbilisi. According to the testimony of the second pilot of this plane, Kabachiknov, they, having received the order of the Minsk dispatcher to clarify the situation, after some time saw some unknown object of an oblong shape, from which 5 bluish rays were emanating, 2 up and 3 down, in the area of 25 kilometers east of Borisov. One of these rays outlined a rectangle on the ground, 10 by 15 kilometers, and with sharp zigzagging movements to the right and left, successively passed over the entire area of this rectangle. Later, another beam from the object was directed at the plane for a short time. The total duration of observation of the object by the crews of both planes was about 35 minutes, although the radars of the Minsk, Riga, and Vilnius airports did not record any unknown objects in the area of the flying planes. There we have Riga again. Riga was involved in the last one, if you remember. That's the city where the airplane had to avoid the object, had to go around. Continuing on here, retired former pilot Lieutenant Colonel A. Kovalchuk reported that he and 5 other adult eyewitnesses, including one aircraft manufacturer, observed at 1 o'clock in the morning on September 7, 1984, 40 kilometers from Baranovichi, a cigar-shaped object about 100 meters long, flying at a distance of half a kilometer from them, flying at an altitude of about 500 meters, and at a speed of 60 kilometers an hour. From the front and rear parts of the object, 2 bluish beams were directed vertically to the ground. When one of these beams illuminated a high-voltage line, a loud crack was heard, and the outdoor lighting in a nearby village immediately went out. So, once again, we have a strange launch combined with UFOs. I don't know what to make of it, and the descriptions are kind of different than other events, but who the hell knows? Just a miscellaneous little thingamajig here. One of the Russian sources that I found had this interesting quote. A leak from the CIA in the early 1970s revealed that it, too, believed that UFOs were representatives of a highly developed civilization coming from a planet that was similar to Earth in many ways. But this planet was near the sun, a star which was no longer warming it, and it was beginning to cool. Its inhabitants concluded that the only way for them to survive was to move to another planet with a similar environment. They believed that Earth might be suitable for this, and they were carefully studying its atmosphere, flora, fauna, and people to determine biological similarities and differences, looking for an answer to the question of whether their race would be able to coexist with the Earth race, what mutants would be like, and studying our ability to resist their invasion. Even if the source is accurate, it's the CIA, so, who the heck knows? I mean, that's a kind of a weird one, and apparently that's a quote from a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. It's on my list to read. It's a pretty famous book, but my list of stuff to read is extremely long, so who the heck knows when I'll get to it. But it's pretty interesting. I mean, just that one quote, is that a leak? Like, did they get that from like a undercover agent uncovered that information? Is that a disinformation thing leaked by the CIA? Did the KGB or whoever completely make that up to throw somebody else off the scent? Who knows? I mean, all these things and more are possibilities, and it's fun to just sort of speculate about what's going on here, but at the end of the day, we don't really know. All right. That's all we got on the Petrozavodsk incident. We got 2 reasonable sized episodes here. And if I could have roped somebody else in, it would have been even longer because I'm sure we would have had discussions and stuff about various topics. But unfortunately, everybody's busy and or sick. So couldn't do it this time. But hey, maybe next time I can sucker somebody else into coming on with me. So final thoughts. I have no idea about this one, man. Is it a rocket launch? I don't know. The witness statements kind of rule out a rocket launch. I kind of feel like I'm missing something on this one. Like, it's just like, I don't understand what I'm reading here. It just seems too weird. In order to be seen over such a wide area, it would have needed to be like a celestial event, possibly like far out in space. Not even a rocket launch would cover such a wide area. However, some reports did place it below a cloud cover and saw things like rapid movement, 90-degree turns, etc. So that kind of rules out a celestial event or a rocket launch. This suggests that there are probably multiple objects for it to be seen in all of these areas, but that doesn't really make sense either. You'd need a lot of these things all over the place, all doing the jellyfish at the same time in order to account for the witness sightings. If you triangulate the angle of elevation and particulars of the sightings from different places, there isn't any altitude that can account for where it was seen. None of the angles match up exactly. The closest is 1,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, or 621 miles, or 3,200,000 feet altitude. That's the closest we can get to placing an object in the sky somewhere so that it can be seen from all of these different places. At least that's what I read. I did not do those calculations myself because I'm not that smart, guys. Math is not my friend. But so apparently 1,000 kilometers is the minimum, right? That's the minimum altitude for it to be seen in all of these different places. But it doesn't work exactly. But let's just say that it is, right? But remember, the Kármán line is just 100 kilometers. That's 1/10. The Kármán line, remember, being space, that's where space starts. It's an arbitrary line. Apparently, there's no, space doesn't start anywhere. The atmosphere gradually gets thinner and thinner as it goes up, and at some point it becomes space, but there's not like a hard line. So the Kármán line is an arbitrary line 100 kilometers above sea level, or about 62 miles, or 320,000 feet. And this object would need to be 1,000 kilometers, or 3,200,000 feet. So 10 times the distance of the Kármán line. And remember, the further away something is, the bigger it must be to have a specific angular size. So according to an online calculator for angular size, this means that at 1,000 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, the object would have to be 440 kilometers across, or 270 miles across, or 1.4 million feet across to have the angular size of 25 degrees. And I used a conservative distance there, right? Some of the discussions I saw said that the Big Dipper is 30 degrees. So if we go 30 degrees, it's even bigger. I was using the smaller 25 degrees-ish measurement there we have of the Big Dipper. So 25 degrees, we're talking 273 miles across in order to appear that big to the witnesses. So that's if this one object caused all of the sightings. Further out is possible, and the further out it gets, the bigger it needs to be in order to cause all of these sightings. And remember, I forget the exact number. It was earlier in the episode, but that was a long time ago, guys. Yeah, like yesterday that I recorded that. But the distance, what was the distance from San Francisco to Los Angeles? Was that like 300 miles? So just go look on a map from the distance between Los Angeles and San Francisco. That's how big the object would need to be in order to appear that big in the sky. That is enormous. That's so big. All right, but also remember, though, that multiple witnesses reported seeing the object below the clouds. One witness in a plane at 10,000 kilometers went around the object. A theodolite measurement placed the object at 6 kilometers or 3.7 miles or about 20,000 feet. So that's a little less than 10 kilometers, but still. So all of this means that there must have been more than one object. And indeed, multiple objects were seen at Letta, Louis, Leningrad, Petrozavodsk, and other places. But a lot, like, it just, I don't know. I keep coming back to the fact that if there were multiple objects, they would all have to do the jellyfish dance at simultaneously at the same time. That's not impossible by any means. It's just really weird. Why would anybody do that? People, nature, aliens, whatever. What would somebody be thinking to cause jellyfish all over Asia and Europe? Like, it's so weird. So I don't know. This is a really fun case. It was a lot of work to put together the notes, but I really enjoyed it because it's one of those ones where I don't really have any strong feelings one way or another. Could it have been an alien spacecraft? Yeah, why not? Could it have been a natural phenomenon? Yeah, why not? I don't know. Nothing really seems to match all of the witness descriptions. Nothing can really account for what people saw. And that makes it a really fascinating case. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for listening. Before we get out of here, I just want to mention another show. This is from one of the guys on Alien Theorists Theorizing. I've been on their show before, and I've had them on my show before. They're a great bunch of guys. But one of them, Braden, I don't know if I think you guys remember, if you remember Braden, I don't know. But Braden has a show that he calls Cosmic Lines, and it's a call-in show. It's really cool because it's not like, so Coast to Coast, if you've ever heard Coast to Coast, it's a call-in show. People call in, talk about weird stuff. There's a lot of stuff on that show where it's fun, it's entertaining, but it seems like maybe they're actors playing off of a script. There's a lot of what you might call woo-based stuff. There's a lot of really weird stuff, and a lot of it to me seems kind of like maybe it's made up a little, just a little bit made up, maybe not completely factual. But Cosmic Lines is really fun because you just have normal, everyday people calling in and sharing strange stories or just having a chat about strange stuff with Braden. And anybody listening, if you feel like calling in and talking about weird stuff, Braden is a really, really good host. A lot of people, now this is strange to me because I've been, since elementary school, I was in, band. So pretty much my entire life until I graduated from college, I had been performing in front of people on some kind of instrument or other. So you just kind of get used to it. Like, I don't really have stage fright. I did at one point when I was a kid. You'd get nervous or whatever, but after some point, you're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's not a big deal anymore. But a lot of people, apparently, they get really nervous. They're like, oh, I don't want to call in. That's kind of scary. But believe me, Braden is a really good host. He will take care of you. If you're nervous, he's really good at conversations. He's really good at asking questions. And, you'll have, trust me, if you want to call in, you'll have a great time talking to him. He's a very charismatic dude, and you'll have a lot of fun. Also, if you don't want to call in and you just want to listen, there's a lot of really, really good stories on this show. So check it out. It goes on, it goes live Thursday nights at 6:00 p.m. California time. Let me just see what time that is GMT. Let's see. 6 6 o'clock p.m. Cali time, tome time to GMT. What am I thinking? Oh, I'm so out of it. I've been sick for so long, guys. I'm done. Okay, so apparently that would be 11 p.m. Greenwich Medium GMT. So if that helps you guys out, I don't know. But anyways, it's a really cool show, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun, and it sort of, my theory is that more people have seen strange stuff than admit to it. But on this show, you can hear everyday people talking about their strange experiences. And yeah, there are a handful of calls that sound like tall tales, but even those are entertaining, and who am I to judge, right? But yeah, some of them clearly sound a little sus, but most of them, they're just average people sharing their strange experiences. But yeah, so check that out. This is not a promo swap. I didn't even tell Braden I was doing this. I really like the show, and I'd like to see it get more listeners and take off, get more callers, a wider audience. It's a really great show. I highly recommend it. All right, I'll shut up about that now. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, keep it strange.